snow hammered her like a punishment she hadn't earned. Elena Ward, 8 months pregnant, stumbled along the shoulder of a county road with one mitten missing and a hospital discharge bracelet biting her wrist. The wind stole her breath and pressed needles of ice through her coat. Her belly tightened. Another contraction, low and mean, and a sound escaped her that was half groan, half prayer. She could still see the scene an hour ago, the motel door slamming, the tail lights of Mark cutting into the storm, his last words condensed to a blur. "I can't do this, it's too much." The echo of abandonment clung to her like frost. In her pocket, the sonogram picture scraped her knuckles, her one warm proof in a freezing world. She drew it out and traced the smudge that was a nose, a spine, a future. The page bent under sleet, another contraction. She braced against a road marker and counted breaths like the nurse taught her. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3. Pain ebbed, left behind a ringing fear. She started forward again, legs heavy, boots filling with snow. "Before we begin, let me know where you are watching from. Leave your country name in the comments below. And if you love stories about courage, loyalty, and community, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next stories." Far down the road, a truck idled near a fallen pine. Its hazard lights blinked in the whiteout like a heartbeat. A tall figure moved in and out of the glow, chopping limbs, clearing a path with a practiced rhythm. A dog shadowed him, silhouette precise, ears like arrows, tail still between pauses, scanning the storm. The wind shifted, carrying Elena's small cry. The dog heard first. He lifted his head, barked once, sharp, urgent, and bounded toward the sound. The man straightened, hand rising in instinct. "Ranger, hold!" But the German shepherd had already launched into the drifts, cutting a line straight to her. Elena swayed as the animal appeared. Close, larger than she imagined, eyes intelligent, breathing a silver cloud. He stopped a length away, head lowered, not threatening, simply there. She tried to speak and failed. The next contraction took her knees. The dog stepped in, shoulder bracing her thigh like a trained doorstop. The man came through the snow a breath later. Jacob Flynn, a soldier in his early 40s wearing a battered camouflage uniform under a rescue parka, dropped to a knee so fast the snow erupted around him. "Mom, I'm Jacob. You're okay? This is Ranger." He peeled off a glove and touched her wrist for a pulse. Calm voice, quick eyes, everything measured. "How far along?" 34, maybe 35 weeks, she gasped. My husband, he left." Jacob didn't look at her ring finger. He didn't need to. He shrugged out of the parka and wrapped it over her shoulders, turning his own uniform into a second layer around her belly. "Going to get you warm, Ranger?" The K9 pressed closer, sharing heat without being asked. The bond was muscle memory. Dog reads man, man trusts dog, built in sand and fire somewhere far from this snow. Elena tried to stand. The world tilted. The road went grey at the edges. Jacob stood with her, one arm a wall under her elbows, the other steadying the curve of her back. "Truck's right there, 20 yards. Can you walk?" She nodded, or thought she did. They moved together step by step, Ranger setting the pace, glancing back every few yards to check her face. At the truck, Jacob boosted her onto the seat, flicked the heater to high, and shoved a folded wool blanket over her legs. He popped a thermal mug, steam loosening the frozen air. Small sips. She drank. The warmth stung her throat, brought tears she hadn't planned to shed. "Thank you." Jacob squeezed water from his hair and grinned without showing teeth. "Bad night to be a road," he said, then softer. "We're here now." The pain shifted again, lower, dragging. She pressed her palm to her belly and breathed. Jacob watched the pattern, counting with her, eyes flicking to the dashboard clock. Ranger sat on the floorboards, chin on the edge of the seat, gaze locked to Elena's face like a medic waiting for a sign. "Contraction started when?" Jacob asked. "An hour, maybe more." She flinched. "They're not close, I don't think." Okay. He reached into a side pouch and pulled out a battered chain with a small brass locket, turning it in his fingers as if it helped him think. He didn't open it. He just held it near his knuckles, a keepsake kept in motion. Then he nodded, made a plan. Nearest clinic is 20 miles west. Plows haven't hit the ridge. There's an EMS station 12 out, but their line's been down since afternoon. He met her eyes. I can get you to my place 5 minutes from here. Wood stove, med kit, radio. We warm you up, stabilize, reassess. If the storm eases, we move. If not, I call in a snowcat from the guard. Elena's lips trembled. Your guard? Still on reserve, he said. Did a few tours. Ranger did more than a few. Ranger thumped his tail once at the sound of his name, then went still again, reading the room. Elena glanced at the windshield. Snow drove like sand on glass. The idea of movement felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Your place, she said. Please. Jacob eased the truck into gear. The tires gripped and released, finding purchase along the plough scars he'd carved earlier. He drove with the easy patience of someone who had threaded convoys through worse than weather. Ranger's ears tracked every branch strike, every mechanical sigh, but his eyes never left Elena. Elena pulled the sonogram from her pocket and spread it on her knees, the paper soft with handling. This is her, she murmured. I call her. The name snagged in her throat. She had chosen it with a man who was gone now. She tried again. I call her Grace. Jacob nodded once, something flickering behind his expression like a match in wind. Good name. They bumped into a lane edged by dark pines and a fence that remembered better summers. A squat cabin waited with a stovepipe pushing out a weak thread of smoke. Jacob stopped close to the porch, cut the engine, and listened to the storm the way soldiers listen to quiet. Satisfied, he swung out and was at her door in seconds. Ranger leapt down, circled, and took position at Elena's open side. On my count, Jacob said gently. 1, 2. She stood with his help, weight on his shoulder, another contraction rising like a tide, then falling short of shore. Inside the cabin, the air hit her first, dry heat, cedar, something like oranges. Jacob moved with efficient grace, stove door, 2 logs, a kettle, riding the hot spot. He guided her to a low couch, layered blankets, positioned 2 pillows beneath her knees. Ranger fetched a folded towel from a basket by the door, a trick Jacob hadn't needed to ask for. The dog placed it carefully on the coffee table, then rested near Elena's shin, not touching, till she shifted a hand to his head. He leaned into the contact and went still. Jacob washed his hands at a basin, stripped off wet gloves, and opened a metal case with elastic loops, blood pressure cuff, sterile pads, a Doppler wand whose batteries he checked by reflex. May I? Elena nodded. He slid the cuff on, pumped, read the dial, and relaxed a notch. Pressure's okay. He warmed the Doppler sensor between his palms, then set it low on her belly. The cabin went very quiet. A beat, another. Then a rhythm surfaced, fast, steady, small. The sound filled the room like a drum you had to be brave to hear. Elena's mouth opened on a sob that turned to laughter halfway through. She covered her eyes with the back of her hand. Ranger's ears perked, Jacob's shoulders softened at the edges. She's strong, he said, and the words carried weight because he didn't waste them. Elena looked at the locket now lying beside the case. Who's in there? She asked, a whisper you use in churches. Jacob's finger tapped the brass once. My wife, May. She died 4 winters back. He didn't explain further. The room didn't ask. The steam from the kettle wrote brief messages on the cold window and vanished. Another contraction. Elena breathed through it while Jacob counted like a metronome, and Ranger matched his breath to hers, a strange, steadying echo. When the pain passed, Jacob set a mug in her hands, broth, not tea. Salt and heat crossed her tongue like mercy. Wind clawed at the chimney. Somewhere a branch cracked under ice. Jacob crossed to the window and parted the curtain with 2 fingers, scanning the white. His posture shifted, subtle but unmistakable, weight on the balls of his feet, attention narrowing. Ranger's head came up in the same heartbeat, eyes cutting to the door. "What is it?" Eleanor whispered. "Could be nothing," Jacob said, and reached to turn down the lamp. Shadows stepped forward, made everything softer, and the room less visible from outside. Eleanor saw the soldier take his place beneath the caretaker. He checked the latch, slid the bolt, repositioned the iron poker near the stove with the absent choreography of long drills. The kettle clicked tiredly. Silence returned, too complete. Elena lifted the sonogram again. Her thumb smoothed the corner with the date. "Grace," she said to the picture, to the dog, to the man, to God. "We're not alone." Jacob's gaze, still angled toward the window, softened. "Not tonight." A sound drifted in then, so faint it might have been imagined. Tires whispering on packed snow where no plough had passed, the sigh of an engine coaxed to hush. Headlights didn't follow. The night held its breath. Ranger stood without a sound and placed himself between the door and Elena's couch, calm but coiled. Jacob's hand found the locket, pinched it once, then let it go. He kept his voice neutral. "Elena, I need you to keep breathing just like before." She nodded, fingers tightening on the sonogram until the paper crinkled. Beyond the frosted glass, someone moved. A shadow crossed the porch and paused, listening. And in the quiet that followed, from inside her own body, Eleanor felt a flutter, soft, insistent, as if Grace had turned toward the sound. The doorknob trembled once, deliberate, testing, and went still in Jacob Flynn's shadow. The doorknob stilled, but the air held the shape of a hand on metal. Jacob Flynn kept one palm on the wall and the other near the poker. Ranger waited in that narrow corridor between calm and command, ears forward, chest low. Elena Ward tightened her grip on the sonogram until it creaked. "Before we begin, let me know where you are watching from. Leave your country name in the comments below. And if you love stories about courage, loyalty, and community, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next stories." "Breathe for me," Jacob murmured, eyes on the door. Elena matched the count he'd given before, slow in, slower out, riding the edge of a contraction that threatened, shrugged, then faded. Ranger's breath fell into sync with hers like a borrowed steadiness. Snow scuffed on the porch, one step, then another. Jacob reached for the lamp and clicked it off. The cabin sank into ember light and the faint halo of the stove. Outside, the wind swallowed any sound that wasn't deliberate. A knuckle tapped once against the door jamb, not the panel. Testing the grain, not seeking permission. "Who is it?" Jacob called. Neutral tone, no challenge, not yet. Silence. Then a man's voice, muffled, defensive. "Eleanor, it's me." Her spine tightened. "Mark," she whispered, apology and ache tangled in 2 letters. Ranger's head snapped, toward her voice and back to the door, choosing posture over growl. Jacob moved closer. "Eleanor, look at me." She did. "Do you want him in here?" Her lips parted, stuck. Memory flared, the motel, the tail lights, the sentence that ended a history. She pressed the sonogram to her sternum and found the truth. No. Jacob nodded once. He thumbed the chain at his neck, the brass locket quick and bright between his fingers, and let it fall. Then he slid the bolt up partway, enough to speak through the crack without granting entry. Cold poured through. "What do you need?" he asked the shape on the other side. "I'm here for my wife," the man said, the words too stiff to wear. "It's dangerous out. I'll take her home." "She's safe," Jacob said. "And she decides where home is." A long exhale hit the wood. "You think I'm the bad guy because I drove off," the voice said, louder now. "You don't know what she's like. She panics. She makes things worse. I needed air." Ranger's lips peeled back a fraction, no sound, just a line of white. Elena pulled the blanket to her ribs, shame heating her face hotter than the stove. The contraction she'd been outrunning reached for her. She breathed through it, eyes on Jacob's shoulder blades, at rest and ready. "We're done tonight," Jacob said. "Storm's too heavy. There's hot food and a radio in here. If you're stranded, I can call a plow or get you to the church shelter once the ridge clears, but she's staying put." The pause that followed was not the pause of a man relieved. It was a bruise filling with thought. "You don't have the right," the voice said softly, almost kind. "She's my wife." "She's a patient," Jacob said, "and a person. Both outrank wife in a storm." The cold edged sharper. From outside, the sound of feet shifting weight, the telltale hiss of a jacket sleeve brushing wood. Jacob eased the door back into its frame and slid the bolt down with a final, gentle click. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "I'm going to the radio. Ranger stays with you." She nodded. Ranger curled between her and the door, eyes fixed, calm as a theorem. The contractions came again, 4 minutes later by Jacob's clock when he returned, that locket a small sun over his heart. He set a compact handset on the table. "Guard post on Ridge 7 is receiving," he said. "Snowcat on standby if we need it. I warned them we might. You're not alone in here." Elena's throat worked. "I feel like I am." "You're not," he repeated, and glanced at Ranger, who thumped his tail once in witness. Another knock. This time it came from the window to the right of the door. 2 quick raps, then a longer drag as if a glove slid along cold glass. Jacob eased to the side, out of line with the pane, and peeled the curtain a finger's width. Headlights off. A truck sat dark at the edge of the lane. A second shape he hadn't seen before shifted near the woodpile. "Company," he said, so soft it barely lived, and Ranger's ears pivoted. He didn't raise his voice, but it changed. "Eleanor, I need you to move to the hallway, slow and small. Take the blanket. Take the picture." She stood with the help of his hand. The motion triggered a contraction that came greedy and tall. She bit back a sound, Jacob's palm pressed between her shoulder blades. "Good. Count." His voice set the cadence. She found it, each number a foothold on a slope she didn't choose. When it passed, he guided her behind the wall, where the stove's heat barely reached, but the sightlines didn't. On the radio, he sent 3 short words in a string that sounded like coordinates, but weren't. Somewhere on the ridge, a plow driver would put 2 and 2 together and decide to drink his coffee slower. Contingencies mattered. "Jacob," Eleanor said from the dim, "if he brought someone—" "That's why we train the dog," Jacob said, and stooped to pick a different tool. Not the poker, not the rifle, just a heavy flashlight that could blind an intruder at the right angle. He set it near the doorframe. The porch groaned. A hand ghosted across the handle again. This time it didn't turn. It waited. "Mark," Jacob called, voice steady. "You're done testing the door. You get back in your truck and go to the church shelter. I'll call them. There's soup and cots." "Let me talk to her." "No." "Then I'm calling the police." "Do it," Jacob said. "I'll hand them the radio." A small eternity passed. Then bootsteps went down the porch. For a breath, it felt over. Elena slid to the floor and put her head in her hands. Ranger didn't move from his post, and that kept Jacob from believing in the easy ending. He went to her, flexed on his toes to meet her at eye level. "Listen," he said, "if he does the right thing, we all sleep. If he doesn't, I'm between you and whatever comes through. Ranger's between both of us and trouble. We stay small, we stay warm, we keep your blood pressure where I like it, and we wait for help all morning, whichever is brave enough to arrive first." She breathed and nodded. "I'm sorry," she whispered, not sure which sin she meant. "Save your energy for the kid," he said. "Apology accepted when you name her after my dog." That pulled a raw, startled laugh from her, one that sounded like paper tearing into something bright. The baby rolled, a determined thump under her ribs. Elena touched that place and closed her eyes. "Grace," she said, "we can do hard things." The truck door outside creaked. Jacob stood and angled for the window again. The cab light came on, one silhouette, maybe two. Voices too low for words? A third shape drifted in from the trees, heavy coat, hat down, deliberate walk. "Three now," Jacob said. "Friends?" "Could be," he said, which in a soldier's grammar meant probably not. He opened the locket with his thumb for the first time tonight and glanced at the photo inside. One look, one breath, years compressed to a vow, and shut it. He moved a second blanket to Elena's shoulders, rolled a towel, placed it under her ankles to shift pressure. Small things, all the time. "Does it ever stop?" she asked. "The fear?" She didn't recognize her own voice. It sounded like a window in winter. "It changes shape," he said. "You learn which door to put your back to." The porch boards flexed again. No knock, just the weight of arrival. Jacob stepped to the hinge side of the door and picked up the flashlight. Ranger's body coiled, silent, yes, in muscle. The world narrowed, stove crackle, Elena's breath, snow whispering at the sill. Outdoors, a key scraped softly against metal. "We don't lock it with a key," Jacob said under his breath. "That's not a key." "What is it?" Elena asked. He listened. The click came again, not at the knob this time, but lower. The sound of a thin tool slipping into a strike plate, testing a cheap bolt's patience. The silhouette at the window leaned, blocking drifted light. Elena felt the baby turn again, a sudden flutter like a bird uncaging its wings, and she whispered to her daughter because there was no one else in her body to comfort. "We're not going anywhere." The metal slipped, caught, slipped again. Somewhere on the ridge, a plough engine revved. Somewhere nearer, a man at a door decided he had time. Then, too close, too clear to mistake, came a new sound. The dry, metallic chki of a slide being racked, outside the cabin, just beyond the porch post, in the dark where headlights should have been. The metallic slide outside the cabin was too deliberate to mistake. Jacob Flynn didn't breathe, didn't move. Ranger, the German shepherd, locked into a crouch, muscles quivering with the sound. Elena Ward pressed both hands over her belly, the contraction forgotten under a deeper terror. Jacob raised a finger. "Wait," he mouthed without sound. "Gun." Ranger's tail stiffened like a rod. The porch held its silence. Then, clack. A boot scuff, heavier than Mark's. Someone else. Jacob whispered. "Elena, down flat. Crawl to the pantry. Stay quiet." Her eyes widened. Then she obeyed, inching along the wall with the blanket over her shoulders. The sonogram crumpled in her fist, but she didn't let it go. She reached the pantry doorway and slid inside, heart hammering louder than the storm. Jacob positioned himself beside the doorframe, heavy flashlight in one hand, poker in the other. His rifle was across the room. Too risky to cross for it now. He would trust steel and light, trust Ranger's teeth. "Step away from the porch," Jacob called. His voice cut low, the command tone of a man who'd held checkpoints at dawn. No answer, just the whistle of air past the eaves. Then, laughter. Not Mark's, too cold, too seasoned. "You're good," the voice said, muffled by the door. "But you know bolts don't hold forever." Jacob's jaw flexed. Ranger growled, a deep vibration like earth moving under snow. "Who are you?" Jacob demanded. "Someone who collects what gets left behind," the voice said. "And she was left. You know it." Elena's throat closed. She pressed her hand over her mouth to keep from crying out. Her daughter shifted inside her, a kick so sharp it felt like resistance. Jacob glanced toward the pantry. Elena's eyes glistened, wide in the dark. He tapped the locket at his chest once, "Trust me," then turned back. "You got 3 seconds," Jacob said, "to leave my porch." The knob jiggled, harder now, then stopped. Silence spread heavy. Jacob waited, breath counting. 1, 2. Then the window shattered. Glass rained onto the rug. A hand in a black glove reached through the shards. Ranger launched, jaws clamping wrist, dragging the arm sideways. A cry ripped from the other side. Jacob swung the flashlight beam. Searing white exploded across the intruder's face through the gap. A man cursed, yanking back his arm, Ranger snapping inches behind. Jacob slammed the curtain down, bolted the inner shutter, his voice cut through. "Out!" Bootsteps pounded across the porch, not one pair, two, maybe three. The snow muffled their retreat into shadows. Jacob exhaled once, shoulders still coiled. He crouched and touched Ranger's ruff. "Good boy." The dog's chest heaved, fur spattered with tiny cuts of glass, but his eyes burned with loyalty. Elena crawled out of the pantry, breath ragged. "What do they want?" Jacob set the flashlight down. "Doesn't matter. They won't take it." He looked at her belly when he said it, not at her face. She pressed the sonogram flat on the table, smoothing the crumples with shaking hands. "They can't." Outside, an engine coughed to life. Tires spun, then bit. The truck rolled away down the lane. For now. Jacob moved to the radio. "This is Flynn. We've got armed contact at my coordinates. I need confirmation on ETA for guard support." The line crackled. A strained voice came through. "Copy. Snowcat en route. 40 minutes if the ridge holds." 40 minutes. An eternity if the men returned. Jacob shut off the radio and met Elena's eyes. "We hold here, together." Elena nodded. A tear broke and slid down her cheek. She wiped it, almost angrily. "I can't run, I can't fight, I'm just waiting." Jacob crouched in front of her, locket gleaming in firelight. "You're carrying life into a world that keeps trying to burn it down. That's not just waiting. That's the bravest fight there is." Her sob turned to something steadier, a sound half-laugh. She pressed her palm to her belly. Grace kicked when they tried the door, like she knew. Jacob looked at Ranger, who sat tall at the broken window, watching the snow where shadows had fled. She'll always know. The kettle hissed, forgotten on the stove. Outside the storm thickened, swallowing tracks, burying intent. But in the cabin, 3 souls held fast, woman, soldier, dog, while the world decided whether dawn would come with peace or with fire. And from the trees beyond the fence, a shape lingered still, eyes catching faint glints of firelight, waiting for its moment. The cabin breathed in fragments, popping stove wood, Elena's uneven breath, Ranger's quiet growl vibrating against the floor. Jacob Flynn didn't relax. He'd seen too many fights start with the sound of retreat. He kept his back to the wall beside the window, flashlight and poker close. His eyes shifted between Eleanor and the broken glass, now sealed by the shutter. Ranger sat rigid, head low, ears tuned to every drift of snow outside. Eleanor clutched her belly, her contractions losing their patience. Each came faster, heavier. She closed her eyes, rode the pain in slow counts, whispering the name she'd chosen. "Grace, Grace, Grace." Jacob crouched beside her. "Time between?" 3 minutes, she whispered, voice frayed. He nodded. It wasn't the time to tell her how close that was. "Keep breathing. Ranger's got the door. I've got the rest." Outside, the wind changed. It carried voices, muffled but near. Not laughter now, orders. Jacob's pulse slowed into the cold clarity of combat. He reached for his radio, but the static was thick. The ridge repeaters had frozen. Ranger's head whipped toward the back wall, his snarl built from a hum to a growl. Jacob followed his gaze, the rear window smaller, frosted, hidden behind the stove. Glass cracked. A gloved hand pressed through. Jacob moved faster than thought. He drove the poker into the wrist, hard and sharp. A cry tore outside. The hand vanished. Blood smeared the frost. "Stay down!" Jacob barked to Elena, who slid to the floor, hands over her head. Ranger whirled and planted himself against the stove, hackles high, waiting for the next breach. Jacob crossed to the rifle he'd leaned near the door. He chambered around with the same reverence as drawing a breath. "They want in. They'll have to crawl over steel." The storm roared, swallowing sound. Then the hammering began, at the back, the side, even the roof. Heavy blows meant to rattle resolve. Elena cried out, not from fear this time, but from the deep wave of contraction that bent her in half. Jacob was there instantly, hand steady on her shoulder. "Look at me, in 2, 3, out 2, 3, that's it." Her tears streaked. "She's coming too soon. She's coming strong," Jacob corrected, his voice iron calm. He guided her through until the contraction broke. Ranger barked once, explosive, as another shadow crossed the porch. Jacob snapped the curtain just wide enough to see. 2 men, this time. One at the door, one circling with a crowbar. The soldier in him catalogued poor formation, no night discipline, nerves hidden under anger. But anger with weapons was still deadly. He pressed the locket once, a gesture as instinctive as cocking the rifle, and whispered, "May, keep her steady." Eleanor watched, breath jagged. "If they get in?" "They won't." "You can't promise that." Jacob looked at her belly, then back to her. "I just did." The men outside argued, voices sharp, cutting over the storm. One wanted to burn the place out. The other warned of guard patrols. Jacob seized the seconds they gave him. He shoved a dresser across the back wall, barricading the smaller window. He pulled the rug tight over the broken glass on the floor, muting sound. "Ranger," he said low. The shepherd pressed against the door, ready. The knob turned again, slow, deliberate. This time, Jacob didn't warn. He fired through the wood, one round, deafening in the small cabin. A scream cut the night. Boots scrambled, fading. Elena flinched, both hands clutching her belly. "God!" Jacob set a steadying palm on her knee. "We're still here. That's all that matters." The stove hissed, sparks jumping. The air smelled of iron, sweat, and pine smoke. Elena leaned back, exhausted, but her face hardened with something more than pain. "Why us? Why now?" Jacob loaded the next round. "Because the world looks for weakness. Tonight it found us." He glanced at Ranger, who hadn't blinked since the shot. But it miscalculated. The storm grew heavier, drumming on the roof like artillery. Then the sound changed. Engines, not just the truck. A deeper growl, tracks on snow. Elena's eyes widened. Them? Jacob listened. The rhythm was steady, official, mechanical. Relief punched through him like heat. "No," he said. "That's our ride." Ranger barked twice, sharp and certain, then sat, tail stiff, as if confirming it. Jacob turned back to Elena, kneeling close. "Snowcat's here. We're getting you to the clinic." She shook her head, a sob tangled in her laugh. "I can't move. She's coming now." The headlights cut through the trees, flooding the cabin with pale rescue, but inside, the contractions didn't care about timetables or vehicles. Elena arched, breath tearing. Jacob caught her hands. "Then we deliver here. Me, you, Ranger. We bring grace into the world together." Elena's tears spilled as she nodded, whispering the name. "Grace." The doorknob rattled one last time, then fell silent under the roar of the approaching engine. Jacob squared his shoulders, hands firm, heart steady. "All right, little one. Time to meet your mother." And as Ranger lay against the door, guarding the threshold, a cry began to rise in the storm. Not of violence, but of life pushing through despair. Storm and silence wrestled at the eaves while the cabin shrank to a circle of heat around the stove. Elena Ward lay on layered blankets, face turned to the firelight, breath hitching into a rhythm she hadn't chosen but refused to break. Jacob Flynn moved with clean economy, boiling water, laying out sterile pads, knotting cord, sliding towels near. Ranger planted himself at the door, spine straight, eyes on the seam of wood and winter, as if he could hold the world together by watching. "Look at me," Jacob said, voice even. "We're going to work in sprints. You breathe, I count. Ranger keeps time. We stay here." Eleanor nodded, jaw tight. A contraction rose like a wall. Jacob set a hand at her shoulder so she could push against his steadiness, and he counted, in, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, until language loosened its grip on pain. She clawed for the sonogram with her free hand. It had wrinkled into a soft square from being held too hard, too long. She flattened it against her heart until the wave receded. Outside, the deeper engine drew close, treads clattering, a snowcat bullying the drifts into obedience. Somewhere behind it, men shouted in clipped syllables that sounded like order. The intruder's truck fired once, then twice. The engine squealed and fell away, choosing distance over losing face. "Help's here," Jacob said, but he didn't turn his back to the room. He checked Elena's pupils, her pulse, the tremor at her wrists. "You're doing it. Grace is doing it." Ranger flicked his ears back at the name, as if to file it alongside the important commands. Jacob shrugged off his field jacket, rolled the sleeves of the battered camouflage underneath, and, without flourish, without prayer for himself, thumbed the brass locket open for a second. The tiny photo of May met him like a lighthouse seen between waves. "Watch us," he breathed, then closed it and moved. Another contraction, bigger, the kind that blanks out all but the oldest words, "No, please, help," and then breaks past them. Elena's hand crushed Jacob's. He didn't flinch. "You're safe," he said. "This is the work. Breathe low." The radio crackled on the table. "Ridge 7 to Flynn. Snowcat at your porch. Do not open until we clear the perimeter." Boots thudded across the boards. A fist rapped a pattern only someone trained would know. Ranger glanced at Jacob. "Permission?" Jacob lifted 2 fingers. "Hold." The dog turned back to the door, a sentry with his orders. Elena groaned, breath coming ragged. "She's coming." "Yes," Jacob said. "With you, not at you." He checked once, quick and careful, then met Elena's eyes with a spark of triumph he rarely allowed himself. "We're close." The kettle shrieked, then settled. The stove pulsed orange. Time thinned to the width of a heartbeat. "Before we begin, let me know where you are watching from. Leave your country name in the comments below. And if you love stories about courage, loyalty, and community, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next stories." Another wave. Elena bore down with a sound that embarrassed her until it didn't. She felt something shift, weight, heat, purpose, and then the world rearranged, the pressure eased, and in its place a new sound split the night. A cry, small, furious, unafraid. Jacob laughed once, astonished, relieved, and moved in clean motions, clearing airways, wrapping warmth, checking color, listening with a soldier's ear and a father's memory. Ranger whined, head tilting toward the noise, as if memorizing it. "She's here," Jacob said, voice rougher than the room had heard. "She's loud. She's perfect." Eleanor sobbed and reached. He placed the baby, wet, pink, astonishing, on her chest. The infant settled at the sound of Elena's heart like someone finding a song they knew before they had a name. "Hi," Elena whispered, the word breaking in the middle. "Grace." The snowcat's door clanged outside. "Perimeter clear," someone yelled, close now, authority carried by wind. Jacob met Ranger's eyes. "Okay, buddy." He unbarred the door and cracked it to a slice. Cold knifed in, then uniforms filled the gap. County deputy in a snow-crusted jacket, a guard medic with a red cross on his cap, another guardsman hauling a trauma bag. "Hands where I can see them," the deputy said on reflex, then saw the scene. Woman, newborn, soldier, in a torn uniform kneeling with cord clamps, and the script in his body loosened. "Sweet Lord." "Flynn," the medic said, already moving in, "what have you got?" "Vaginal delivery 34 to 35 weeks by mother's report," Jacob answered, clinical, fast. "Good tone, strong cry, colour coming in, mum's BP acceptable, contractions regular, minimal hemorrhage. I haven't cut yet." "Copy." The medic knelt opposite him with quiet competence and a smile that found Elena without intruding. "Ma'am, I'm Jess. You did the hard part." Ranger eased sideways to make room, but kept his ribs against the jam. The deputy glanced down, reassured by the kind of dog that only disobeys when he knows he's right. "Any other threats?" the deputy asked Jacob, under the hum of the medic's work. 3 males earlier," Jacob said. "One injured, they retreated when the cat arrived. One other, Mark, may still be in a truck down lane." The deputy's mouth flattened. "We'll sweep him up." "Don't escalate," Jacob said, not as a challenge, but as someone who hated unnecessary paperwork because it meant someone had bled. "He's panicked, not trained. The other two know picks and won't hold ground." "Understood." The deputy tipped his chin toward Ranger. "Dog stays." "Dog stays," Jacob said. The medic finished with gentleness that made Elena shake. When the clamps clicked, she exhaled like a door unlocking. Jess wrapped Grace tighter, tested reflexes, and nodded approval, as if stamping a passport. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a scream like she owns the county," she said, placing the baby back on Elena's chest. "Skin to skin, that's your miracle, right there." Elena kissed the damp hair and closed her eyes. "Thank you," she said, to Jess, to Jacob, to the dog, to the stove, to the God who, if he watched, did it with patience. Outside, radios murmured, units setting cones, someone towing a pickup out of a drift, a guard clearing branches from the lane, with a practiced economy Jacob recognized like an old song. The cabin's temperature felt suddenly human. The deputy stepped to the broken window, studied the blood on frost. "We'll cast prints at first light," he said. "And you?" He pointed vaguely toward the snow where the intruders had gone. "You better pray you find a church before I find you." Mark appeared at the door then, flanked by a guardsman, not cuffed, just held by embarrassment. He looked smaller than his coat, eyes swollen and red-rimmed, storm-slick hair plastered to his temple. "Is she—" "She's fine," Eleanor said, without turning her head. Her voice surprised her by not shaking. "We are." Mark's mouth opened and shut. He swallowed. I messed up." Jess, not a cop and not a priest, raised a palm without looking up. "Not this room, not this minute," she said. "Let Mum hold her baby." Mark's shoulders dipped. He took one step back onto the porch like a tide receiving instructions. Jacob stood, joints cracking, and moved to the stove. He added a log, then poured water and set a mug near Jess without asking. She nodded thanks as if they'd done this for one another for years. Ranger, satisfied the thresholds were guarded, moved to Elena's side and lay his big head near her hip, close enough to keep, far enough not to jostle. "Flynn," the deputy said quietly at the door. "I'll need statements after transport." "You'll have them," Jacob said. Eleanor stroked Grace's cheek with one careful finger. The baby rooted, found, latched. The room changed temperature again in ways thermometers can't measure. Jacob looked away on purpose, not from discomfort. He'd seen life born in worse places, but because reverence sometimes looks like turning your head. He glanced at the locket and thumbed it, a wordless thank you delivered to brass and memory. "We build forward," he said under his breath, uncertain whether he spoke to May or to himself. Jess checked vitals again and gave a satisfied, unsentimental smile. "We can move if we want to," she said, "but honestly, this room's as good as my rig right now. Warm, quiet, all hands on deck." Eleanor's eyes lifted to Jacob. "I want to stay an hour," she said. "Then clinic." "Hour it is," Jess agreed. "We'll keep the cat idling." Mark hovered like a bad smell, trying to apologize for itself. The deputy angled his body to make that hovering happen farther from Elena's sightline. "You can talk later," he murmured. "Right now you can shovel the porch and be useful." Mark blinked, nodded, and fled to the task gratefully. Silence, good silence, settled. The stove ticked, the snow softened its tantrum into a steady hush. Ranger dozed with one eye a sliver open. Grace drank like she'd invented the idea. Jacob crouched again, not too close. "You did it, Eleanor." "We did it," she said, and the plural sat right in the air. He nodded. "You'll have choices to make," he said, plain and kind. "About shelters, about papers, about who stands where when the wind picks up again." "None of them tonight." Elena looked down at Grace. The baby's tiny fist opened and closed against Elena's collarbone, like someone learning how to claim a world. Elena laughed, a tired laugh that sounded like a promise. I thought being left was the end, she said. Maybe it was just the middle. Sometimes the middle is where the miracle fits, Jacob said. Ranger's ear flicked, catching something new. He raised his head, nostrils testing air. The deputy straightened in the doorway and touched his radio. "Hold," he told whoever was listening. "We've got—" From the tree line, a flare arced clumsily into the sky, red-orange sputter, not military smooth, too close to the cabin. It hung a breath, then fell, hissing into the snow not 20 yards off and smoking like a fuse that hadn't picked a job yet. Jess looked up, brows knitting. "Signal or scare?" "Both," Jacob said, standing, eyes narrowing at the window. He laid a hand on Ranger's shoulder. The shepherd stood in one motion, silent and ready, guarding two thresholds at once, the door against the world, and the small circle where a mother and her daughter taught themselves each other. Outside, the flare hissed lower, a coil of smoke writing a question mark over the snow as dawn inched toward the ridge. The flare sputtered in the snow, a hiss that wrote grey smoke into the frozen air. Jacob Flynn's eyes narrowed. Ranger had already shifted his stance, body stiff, ears locked on the tree line. Elena Ward, pale and shaking with her newborn on her chest, clutched the blanket tighter, her instinct wrapping around Grace before her mind caught up. The guard medic, Jess, cursed softly. "That's not ours. Wrong caliber, wrong fuse." The deputy was already at the window, rifle slung to his shoulder. "Signal or distraction?" "Both," Jacob answered. His voice was flat, certain. "They want eyes outside while they test a weak spot." As if on cue, a crack split the air. Not a gunshot, wood breaking. The sound came from the back of the cabin. Ranger barked, sharp, furious. Elena flinched, clutching her baby closer. Jacob rose from his crouch. "Jess, stay with her. Deputy, with me." He touched Ranger's shoulder. "With me, buddy." Eleanor's voice caught. Don't leave us." Jacob turned to her, brief but steady. "I'll never leave you unguarded. Ranger's with me. Jess is here. You're covered." Elena nodded, biting her lip. She pressed her cheek to Grace's damp hair and whispered, "We're not alone. We're not alone." Jacob and the deputy slid to the back hallway. The storm clawed at the roof, drowning subtler sounds, but Ranger's low growl marked the intruder's position. They found the source, an old window shutter forced wide, wood splintered. A shadow moved in the gap. Jacob didn't hesitate. He swung the flashlight beam directly into the man's face, white light searing. The figure stumbled, cursing. The deputy slammed the butt of his rifle against the sill. "Sheriff's office! Drop it!" Instead, the man lunged. A crowbar glinted. Ranger launched with a snarl, jaws locking on the man's forearm before he could swing. The intruder screamed, tried to twist free. Jacob moved in, striking the crowbar loose with the flashlight's weight. The deputy pinned the man with his rifle stock. "Got him," the deputy barked, dragging the figure through the shattered frame and slamming him into the wall. Ranger released only when Jacob gave the word. The man sagged, gasping, wrist bleeding. His eyes flicked wild, darting to the front room, toward Elena's muffled cries of effort. "We just wanted the baby." The words made Jacob's blood run cold. He shoved him harder against the wall. "You don't get to say that." Boots thundered on the porch, guard reinforcements storming in. Two soldiers hauled the intruder outside into the snow, shackling him quick and clean. Inside, Jess called urgent, "Jacob, it's happening now!" Jacob sprinted back, Ranger at his heels. On the couch, Elena was bent forward, face slick with sweat, Grace in her arms, but something still not finished. Jess's hands were steady, but her voice was tight. "Placenta's not passing clean. She's bleeding more than I like." Jacob dropped to his knees. "What do you need?" "Pressure, now." Jess pressed pads, her jaw tight. "Keep her awake. Keep her breathing." Eleanor's head lolled. Jacob caught her chin in one rough hand. "Eleanor, look at me. Stay here. Grace needs you. I need you." Her eyes fluttered. "So tired." Jacob's other hand found the locket at his chest. He pressed it into her palm, folding her fingers around it. Hold this. My wife carried me with this when I wanted to let go. Now you carry it. Squeeze it. Elena groaned, closing her hand around the metal. May, Jacob's throat tightened. Yes, she'd tell you stay, fight, don't give up. Something in Eleanor snapped back awake. She gripped the locket like a lifeline, whispering Grace's name over and over. Minutes blurred. Jess worked fast, commanding like a field surgeon. The deputy barked updates from outside. 2 intruders detained. Truck secured. Perimeter clear. Ranger never moved from the couch's side, his big head resting against Elena's leg, grounding her in the fight to remain. Finally, Jess leaned back, exhaling hard. Bleeding slowed. Placenta's clear. She's stable. Jacob shut his eyes a second. The soldier in him had lived through firefights and ambushes, but this had shaken him deeper. Elena wept quietly, cradling Grace. We're still here. Yes, Jacob said. His voice was hoarse but steady. You are. Outside, dawn cracked the horizon at last, a pale line fighting through storm clouds. The snowcat's engine rumbled like a guardian beast, its lights sweeping the lane. The night had been long, but inside the cabin, in the circle of fire and faith, something stronger than fear had survived, and as the first sunlight touched the broken window, Grace stirred and stretched, her tiny cry rising like a hymn above the wreckage. Morning came like a wound, stitched with light. The storm broke into ragged silence, snow settling heavy across the valley. Jacob Flynn stood at the porch, shoulders squared under a grey sky, watching guard troops sweep the tree line for stragglers. Ranger stayed close, nose testing the air, tail stiff. The German shepherd hadn't slept, not even when the cabin had finally gone still. Inside, Elena Ward lay curled on the couch with her daughter. Grace's small chest rose and fell in steady rhythm against her mother's skin. Every breath was a miracle, Elena counted, her fingers never leaving the baby's back. Jess, the medic, sipped coffee near the stove, her eyes always returning to Elena, checking for color, strength, signs of hidden bleeding. She'll hold, Jess murmured when Jacob stepped back in. I've seen women break apart after nights half this rough. She's steel. Elena opened her eyes, voice raw but steady. Not steel, just Grace. She kissed her baby's damp hair. She's the strong one. Jacob crouched beside her, resting one hand on the arm of the couch, not too close. Both of you are. His gaze flicked to the locket she still held tight in her palm. She hadn't given it back. He didn't ask. The deputy stomped snow from his boots, face flushed from cold. 2 in custody. One's the joker with the crowbar. He'll need stitches. The other's clammed up. Says they were just hired muscle. Didn't even know what they were after. Jacob's jaw tightened. They said it. They wanted the baby. Elena flinched, pulling Grace closer. Why? The deputy shook his head. Could be trafficking. Could be some twisted grudge. Could be nothing but desperation. We'll find out. He looked at Jacob. Mark's with them. Not cuffed. Just... He gestured vaguely. Lost. Eleanor closed her eyes. A shadow passed over her face. I don't want him here. Jacob's voice was low, final. He won't come near you again. As if summoned, Mark hovered at the doorway, cap in hand, shoulders hunched. He looked older than the night before, or maybe just smaller. Elena, his voice cracked. I thought I couldn't do it. The baby, the storm, everything. I was wrong. Elena didn't look at him. She traced Grace's cheek instead, her voice calm. You left when I needed you most. She was born without you. That doesn't change. Mark swallowed hard. Please. Jacob stepped forward, blocking his view. His voice cut like winter. You'll say what you need to the sheriff, not her, not now. Mark's eyes flicked from Jacob to Ranger. The dog's steady stare told him what words could not. He backed away into the snow. Elena exhaled, a long shiver. Thank you. You don't owe me thanks, Jacob said. He leaned on his knees. You owe Grace a future. That's where your strength goes now. Jess packed her kit, giving them space. The guardsman prepared the snowcat for transport, radios buzzing with clipped updates. But the cabin felt outside of time: mother, child, soldier, dog, 4 hearts woven by something larger than survival. Elena stroked the locket in her hand. "May," she whispered. "She carried you once. Now she carried me." She opened her fingers and held it toward Jacob. He looked at it a long moment. His throat worked, but he didn't take it. "Keep it," he said finally. "You'll need it more than I do." Elena's eyes brimmed. She closed her fist around the brass. "Then I'll carry a memory, for all of us." The baby stirred, a small cry that cut through the quiet. Ranger raised his head, ears flicking. Jacob smiled faintly. "She sounds like she already wants to be heard." "She will be," Elena said, fierce through her exhaustion. "I'll never let her be forgotten." The deputy tapped the frame of the door. "Snowcat's warm. We can move when you're ready." Elena looked around the cabin, the stove still crackling, the blankets that had caught her tears, the walls that had held back shadows. "I don't want to leave it," she whispered. This is where she came into the world. Jacob met her gaze. "You don't leave it. You carry it. Every place you go from here is built on this night." Elena nodded slowly. She gathered Grace, wrapping her carefully in the blanket. Jacob offered his arm, and for the first time she leaned into it without hesitation. Ranger pressed at her other side, silent assurance. Together they stepped onto the porch. The storm had passed, leaving the world crystalline, white, and endless. The flare's ash still smouldered near the tree line, curling faint smoke into the dawn. Soldiers moved with quiet efficiency, but for a breath it was only them: woman, child, soldier, dog, etched against the snow. Elena lifted Grace, showing her the first light of morning. "This is where we begin," she whispered. Jacob glanced at Ranger, then back at Elena. Not the end, just the middle. And as the sun crested the ridge, Grace opened her eyes, blinking against the light, her cry rising once more. It was not a cry of fear, but of arrival. And in that sound, every scar of the night found a reason to heal. The snowcat rumbled, exhaust curling like smoke against the dawn. Its treads had carved a path through the drifts, a scar of survival across a white world. Elena Ward stood at the edge of the porch, Grace bundled close, her body weak but her spirit sharpened by the night. Jacob Flynn was at her side, his presence steady as the cold, and Ranger pressed near her knee, vigilant even in the softer light. The deputy waited at the snowcat's open hatch. "Clinic's prepped. We'll have her under watch within the hour." His voice was gentle but urgent. "You've both earned rest." Eleanor hesitated. She looked back at the cabin, the stove still burning, the blankets crumpled where she had labored, the broken glass glittering on the rug. This was where fear had met faith, where despair had given way to a cry that changed everything. She whispered, "This room saved us." Jacob's gaze softened. "Rooms don't save, people do. You did." Her eyes lifted to him. "We did." He gave the smallest nod, and Ranger thumped his tail once, as if sealing the truth. Mark stood near the snowcat, a guardsman shadowing him. His head hung, cap twisting in his hands. He dared a glance at Eleanor, then at Grace, but said nothing. The shame in his silence was louder than any plea. Eleanor's lips trembled, but her voice held firm. "You don't get to choose her story anymore." Mark flinched, his eyes glistened, and for a heartbeat he looked ready to collapse into snow, but he said nothing, just allowed the guard to guide him toward the waiting jeep. His footprints disappeared into the white. Elena exhaled, shoulders loosening. Grace stirred and made a small sound, a whimper that smoothed into steady breathing when Elena kissed her head. Jess, the medic, shouldered her kit. "Time to move. Cold's no friend to a newborn." Jacob steadied Elena with one arm, his other hand resting on Ranger's collar. He guided her toward the snowcat, every step deliberate. When she climbed inside, he paused, locket glinting faintly in the rising light. Elena noticed. "You never let it go, did you?" He shook his head. "Some promises you don't outlive." Her eyes fell to Grace, then back to him. "Then promise me something new. Don't leave us alone in this." The words cracked something inside him, the soldier's armor worn thin by years of loss. He looked at Ranger, who gazed back with patient certainty, and then at the woman who had survived the night's storm with nothing but her faith and her child. "I promise," he said simply, "as long as you need." Ranger climbed into the snowcat first, settling on the floor near Eleanor's boots. Grace reached with her tiny hand, brushing the dog's fur. Ranger went still, ears twitching as if acknowledging the bond. The engine roared, treads grinding forward. The cabin shrank behind them, a lone witness against the snow. Elena pressed her forehead to the glass, tears slipping quietly. She whispered to Grace, but loud enough that Jacob heard. "We leave broken, but we don't stay broken. We heal forward." Jacob's hands tightened on his knees. He whispered to himself, "May, I think you'd have liked her." The ride jolted over frozen ruts. Guardsmen spoke low into radios. The deputy checked his rifle one last time, then leaned back with a tired sigh. But inside the snowcat's cabin, there was a cocoon of warmth. Elena nursed Grace, her face softened with peace that hadn't touched her in months. Jacob dozed with one eye open, Ranger watching the horizon as if daring it to try again. When the snowcat crested the ridge, sunlight spilled full across the valley, dazzling off the white in blinding brilliance. For a moment, the world didn't look scarred. It looked new. Elena lifted Grace higher, showing her the light. "See it, my love. This is what we fought for." Jacob watched them, something unspoken in his chest. He wasn't family by blood, but in that moment he understood. Family wasn't always chosen in calm days. Sometimes it was forged in storms. The snowcat roared on toward the clinic, but the night they had survived remained etched into them. Woman, child, soldier, dog. Not broken, beginning. And as dawn crowned the world with gold, Grace's small cry rose above the engine's thunder, a hymn of life that promised every scar could become a story of healing.